So for those of you who don't know, this is a film camera that shoots 35mm film that was produced in the late 1990s to early 2000s that really spoke to semi-pro to professional shooters who were kind of on the cutting edge of the digital age at that time. It was in that middle ground between where film is going out of style and digital is the hot new thing, but yet it's super powerful for what it is comparatively to other cameras that shoot film and 35 specifically. Now the EOS 3 comes with specific features that in the digital age we might not even consider them features because we've taken them for granted, but at this time the fact that it had certain features makes it kind of why it's a premium camera of that time. For one, we get autofocus, and the fact that we have 45 autofocusing points, the fact that we get the EF mount for glass from Canon, which is a legendary line that we're all familiar with. And then beyond that, we also get an in-body light meter that alone is kind of worth picking up this camera for because of how good it is and accurate. But beyond that, these are just 3 features that in the digital age, we might have forgotten about. But at the time, these things alone, for me, would have made it a premium camera worth absolutely every penny. For me, it comes down to ease of use and just being able to use things that are already accessible with my Canon digital line that I shoot with already. For me, there's a lot of reasons why I like this camera, but I think generally that's kind of the biggest thing, especially when we compare it to other cameras that have made it into my collection today. For example, one of my favorite cameras, one of my first film cameras, was the Canon A1, and one camera that I truly enjoy, but it barely makes it into the wild anymore other than just kind of when I show people around what I have. It's kind of one of those cameras that I don't take out very often because unless I already know going in that it's going to be a low pressure kind of situation, it's one that takes so long for me to shoot and to go through an entire roll of 35 that I typically just don't take it anymore. Now don't get me wrong, I think the Canon A1 is an awesome camera overall and it's super fun to shoot and it really gives you that traditional film kind of camera vibe. But on the other side, when it comes to actually using it, it can be kind of daunting knowing that you have to do everything manually and there are certain things and functions and features and creature comforts that we just get with the EOS 3 that we don't with that camera. And that's probably why I don't take it as much. So I think these are the things that make the Canon EOS 3 something that's really changed my mind about shooting 35mm consistently, not just sporadically like a hobbyist, but if you were going to be a traditional semi-pro or even a professional 35mm film photographer. The fact that it has 45 autofocusing points, when we compare that with a digital camera today, is not really spectacular. But on the other side, when we compare it to what it means to actually manually focus a lens, it really changes the experience for the shooter. It really makes you feel like you have control and you are accurate with taking your photo. And the fact that when you marry that with the EF mount of the camera, it means that if you already bought lenses for your digital cameras, you can use these now with a film camera to really spice up your work. Realistically, a lot of film cameras you can still find a lot of lenses for and they're very cheap, but if you already have these on hand because you shoot Canon digitals, it really makes it fun because these were lenses that you chose because you like those focal lengths or you like those apertures, and now you get to use those in your film photos as well. And just as an aside, this camera has one of the coolest features that is super simple right here with the wheel on the back. This is the aperture selection wheel, which gives you the ability to actually obviously change aperture and like kind of how you're gonna take your photo, but it does it in a way that gives you a tactile wheel and it puts it on the back of the camera, so when your face is kind of plastered to the camera itself, it's super easy to reach, very, very useful. Just this little feature makes this feel like a truly premium camera. I know some people will think like, oh, it's just a wheel or whatever, but for me, honestly, it's one of the coolest features and one of the most useful features of the entire camera, so I definitely had to mention it. And even beyond that simple little function of the aperture wheel, it actually really was interesting to see Canon innovate with this camera with a feature called Eye Control Autofocus. This is essentially a feature inside the actual diopter of the camera itself where you could select it, calibrate it, and essentially you're using your pupil as the place where you're going to select autofocus. The camera is realistically tracking your pupil, and then when you're half pressing the shutter for autofocus, it's going to move the autofocus point compared to those 45 points to the closest place that you're looking. I personally just set my own autofocus points, but it's still a feature to mention because of the innovation of a camera that would have been kind of marketed to a group of professionals in that time period. But in the sake of fairness, let me throw in just a couple of drawbacks, that way no one thinks that I'm realistically just trying to overhype a 35mm camera from like the late 1990s. So in this category of drawbacks, there are really two things that I think really are kind of drawbacks for some people and maybe not others, but they're definitely worth mentioning because they're things that I noticed while I've used the camera. The first thing to mention is weight. Now, the EOS 3 is not a super light camera. It can be kind of hefty at times, especially if you throw on a longer lens or a heavier lens. So if you're in the street photography world, you might think about picking something else up because of that. But for me specifically, I use an RB67, which probably weighs like 40 pounds, especially when I gear it out. So for me, it's lesser of an important thing, but for certain photographers out there, certain shooters, there's definitely going to be a little bit of a drawback here when it comes to weight. The second thing that I would mention as a drawback for certain shooters, this is again going to depend on your subject, but the mirror absolutely slaps. It crushes the sound barrier. It is pretty loud. So for places where you need to be reasonably quiet, and audio is kind of an issue, I think this camera might not necessarily be great for those instances. For example, I'm thinking like a wedding photographer who is trying to be non-invasive to a ceremony. Yeah, in this case, that camera might not be great for that. Definitely would be awesome to take out at the reception, but if you're trying to be non-invasive to like an event like that, may not be the camera for you. So for certain shooters, just think about that. It's something that doesn't really affect me very much, but something to consider, I guess. But beyond all of that, that's kind of my ideas for this camera and why it makes it so great and truly makes me want to shoot 35 all over again. So I'd love to know now, if you haven't already gone down in the comments, let me know what you think about just this camera or any of the ideas I've kind of explained in this video. Are you someone who also struggles with shooting 35 because of potentially there's a lot to shoot and your camera kind of holds you back? Or are you somebody who could burn through 35 frames on any camera no matter what it is? I would love to know all of your opinions down below. And hopefully while you're down there, you'll check out my links for Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Those are the usual links that are always there. I hope you'll check me out on those sites and let me know some of your things or thoughts there as well. And along with those links, I've actually left a specific link for the Moment store, which has accessories and film for film cameras. So if you're thinking about picking this up, I know we're kind of in the holiday season trying to wrap it up, but if you're looking for those last minute kind of things, or if this is something that you want to pick up or you want to pick it up for someone else, they have plenty of things to go along with this camera that I think would be really awesome. So definitely check out that link as well. But beyond all of that, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for checking this one out. I super appreciate it. Thanks for sticking around. I'm going to hit you with my typical peace out, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one. See you guys later.